Well, I think the MPC, the rate setters at the Bank of England, have a different dilemma than they did during the crisis. This is something where they have very little direct control. And moreover, they get caught whenever they even just say straight up economic analysis, as the bank just released, people accuse them of being political. So now they're seen as potentially pushing for May's deal versus no Brexit, whereas all they're saying is, remember, there's a sterling angle to this, and remember, Brexit is bad, which are just facts.
Well, given that central bank independence is something you've studied extensively, I mean, do you think the Bank of England is right to put out these forecasts around Brexit?
I think at some point they have to. There is an issue. There is an issue in how they do it, and they clearly don't want to be weighing in as having values judgments. But, you know, I remember when I was at the bank, a much smaller but still important issue of Scottish independence came. And the bank very carefully did not, and all of us MPC members agreed not to talk about it. But that was in part because you couldn't, there was no huge effect on the British economy. Brexit is, I won't say existential, but it's very important. You can't duck it.
Well, this makes me think, you're talking about crisis era, your time at the MPC. I mean, when you hear the warnings coming from the Bank of England that a no-deal Brexit, a worst case scenario Brexit, could be worse than the global financial crisis? I mean, do you think that's realistic?
I do. I've been strongly opposed to Brexit and making those kinds of forecasts for the time of the referendum, I mean, from spring of 2016. It's obviously much more important coming from the Bank of England than from me. But the UK has benefited enormously from being in the EU, particularly as an investment base for people to do business in the EU. Before the break, your colleague from Barclays was talking about, you know, rule of law, English language, good place to invest defensively, headquarters. A lot of that goes away, even not in the worst case Brexit, but certainly in the worst case Brexit. And that's a permanent shock.
Let's stick with the scenario of the worst case Brexit, often referred to as the no deal scenario. I keep thinking of Theresa May back when Article 50 was first triggered. I mean, she often touted this line that no deal was better than a bad deal. Do you think that is coming back to haunt her now that she's really trying to get this deal through?
It's kind of, but you know, you were talking in the break about George H.W. Bush. This isn't like read my lips, no new taxes. I think people do feel better with her having had deal than no deal, and even I, who don't like the deal she's got, think that's better than no deal. So I don't think that's really hurting her. The issue is, at what point do you start admitting that the UK could choose not to do this at all? And I think that's part of what Labour's going for with their talk about a legal inquiry into what's going on.
What do you think the impact would be, speaking of Labour, of a Jeremy Corbyn leadership?
I mean, I don't like, yeah, no, I understand. I don't like to get into individuals, but I mean, based on their manifesto, it would not be good. It would be taking the UK back several decades. I mean, there's a lot of reason to redistribute wealth and to reevaluate some specific privatizations like the rail lines. But to be sort of in the wholesale assault on capitalism, especially when the UK has actually delivered pretty good improving income equality over the last decade plus, I think it would be a mistake.
And what is your view on this outlook that perhaps there could even be a second referendum, especially if we get an election?
Well, I think that would be the best outcome, frankly. I think, as several people have pointed out on Twitter and in the real world, there's nothing politically, legally, or ethically that says a democracy can't decide to change its mind on an important issue. And the Parliament is sovereign legally. They could just decide not to do this, but given May and Corbyn's positions, that doesn't seem to be an option. So having another referendum is great. Now, there's always the risk that, even given the current polling data, say they vote for Remain, but it's 55-45, then the EU has to cope with a country where 45% of the people keep saying they don't want to stay in. That's tough. There's also the question of what's the referendum question. I mean, ideally it should be hard Brexit or stay in. But May, of course, wants it to be her deal as one of the referenda options, which doesn't really help.
Hey everybody, it's Hadley Gamble from our new CNBC Middle East Bureau in Abu Dhabi. Thanks for stopping by. Now, to watch more, you can try one of the videos that just popped up on your screen. And don't forget to subscribe.